This episode is brought to you by VPP Simplified. Now you can get element by element tracking and guidance for your VPP journey. Every aspect of the VPP requirements in one easy-to-use interactive spreadsheet. It explains every sub-element in detail, contains an easy-to-read stoplight so you can track current status for each sub-element. It provides you with a 3-step verification for completion of each sub-element. There's even a notes section for you to compile language that will eventually be used for your VPP application. It even comes complete with graphs to show current state and track your progress moving forward. Look, achieving VPP star status can be tough, but understanding what it takes to get there can be simplified. This VPP Gap tool will help you do that. Go to vppsimplified.com for more information.
Welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast, where we help you manage workplace safety one episode at a time. And now, your very own Safety Pro, Blaine J. Hoffman.
Welcome to another episode of the Safety Pro Podcast. I am still on vacation when this podcast episode comes out. So it's I record these a little bit ahead of time. I have some lead time. I try to keep them timely, but I knew I was heading out for a spring break with the family, the dog and the camper, heading to the beach. So hopefully, I'm just enjoying a great sunrise, sunset, or a fantastic day at the beach when this episode drops. I will still be checking email periodically, so please keep that information coming. But hey, this episode, what I wanted to do is I wanted to highlight an often underutilized tool that is available for safety professionals, supervisors, owners, operators, even employees. An underutilized tool, and it is free. Absolutely free. I will reveal this tool at the end of this episode. So first, I want to get into the topic. I want to cover the steps to an effective hazard communication program. Employers that have hazardous chemicals in their workplaces are required by OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard, or HCS, found at 29 CFR 1910.1200. So 1910-1200. You're required to implement a hazard communication program. The program must include labels on containers of hazardous chemicals, safety data sheets for hazardous chemicals, and training for workers. Each employer must also describe in a written program how it will meet the requirements of the HCS in each of these areas. So I am going to show you, well, it's a podcast, so really tell you, right? I am going to tell you how you can implement an effective hazard communication program in 6 easy steps. Step 1, learn the standard and identify responsible staff. So one, you're going to have to get a copy of the HAZCOM standard. You can do that by going to OSHA.gov. Get a copy of 1910-1200 and start educating yourself on its requirements. I'll break down the paragraphs you want to focus on here in a second. Become familiar with the provisions in that standard. Make sure that someone has primary responsibility for coordinating its implementation in your business. And then, of course, you'll want to identify staff for specific activities required under the standard, like training. So you can go to OSHA.gov/DSG/HAZCOM. Don't worry, I'll have the link in the show notes. Or a quick tip for you navigating the website is go to OSHA.gov. Up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a to Z. It's a way you could look up topics from A to Z. Click that. If you just put in HAZCOM in the search window, everything's just going to show up. So go to the A to Z index, and then hazard communication is under H, and you're on the HAZCOM page. So the provisions of the standard that apply to employers using chemicals in their workplaces are found primarily in paragraphs E, the written HAZCOM program, F, labels and other forms of warning, G, safety data sheets, and H, employee information and training. It's important that you become familiar with those provisions to determine what is needed for compliance in your workplace. In order to ensure that you have an effective hazard communication program and address all of the necessary components responsibility for implementation of hazard communication should be assigned to someone to coordinate. The person designated for overall program coordination should then identify individual staff members to be responsible for specific activities, like training, as I mentioned before. Okay, so that was step 1. Learn the standard and pick your people. Before I get into step 2, I want to take a quick break and just tell you a little bit more about our partners in safety. They're not just my partners in that they help me keep this podcast going, but they're true partners in safety because they provide the tools and materials that many of us rely on to help keep our people safe. Now, safety and security starts with knowing who's on site. That's why you need to know who's on location. Okay, who'sonlocation.com handles visitor management, contractor management, employee attendance, and even evacuation management. Who's on Location's evacuation management helps you get your people safe and give first responders critical information about who cannot be accounted for before they put their lives at risk. It is available for iOS, both iPhone and iPad, Microsoft, both phone and Surface, and Android, both phone and tablet, as a web application. The evacuation management, you can roll call employees, visitors, and contractors. They swipe their name from the present on-site list when they are safe during an evacuation using the web app. And you can send everyone on site a request via text to confirm they're in a safe location in just a few clicks. This is a really cool feature. You know, when they reply with the word safe, they're automatically removed from the list of people you still need to verify. And if someone replies with anything other than the word safe, it's relayed to all app users in case somebody is nearby and is able to safely render assistance. Check it out for yourself. You're not going to be disappointed. Get a 30-day free trial by going to who'sonlocation.com. You get access to all features and add-ons, no credit cards required. Again, go to who'sonlocation.com for a 30-day free trial today. You know, a big part of HAZCOM is identifying the location of hazardous chemicals, especially if you're storing large quantities like skids, pallets, drums, things like that. And the official floor marking, floor sign company of the Safety Pro podcast can help you with this. Yep, I'm talking about MightyLine Floor Tape. They know how important safety is to your organization. The breadth of the MightyLine product line covers everything you need to implement a 5S system for the increased productivity of your facility and the safety of your workers. Now, MightyLine floor signs are a great product to not just regulate workplace traffic, but also to help you identify hazards in the workplace and demarcate the location where you want people to store certain chemicals. These signs are fully customizable to fit exactly what your company needs. You can use your own logo and high-res images. What's more, MightyLine floor tape is 7 times thicker than the average floor tape. Their patented technology makes it more durable. The beveled edges increases durability during forklift traffic. The peel and stick adhesive removes easily, and it's all made right here in the USA. Why not grab a free sample? Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast, fill out the form, get a free sample sent right to you. And hey, while you're there, why not check out past episodes of the Safety Pro podcast? Again, great partners in safety can help you regulate safety in your workplace. Again, go to mightylinetape.com/podcast for your free sample today. Alrighty, step number 2 on how you can implement an effective hazard communication program is prepare and implement a written HAZCOM program, the actual written program itself. Prepare a written plan to indicate how hazard communication will be addressed in your facility based on step number 1 about learning about the standard and identifying responsible staff, right? Picking your people. Prepare a list or inventory of all hazardous chemicals in your workplace. This is where you start to document things. Now, paragraph E, echo, of the standard requires employers to prepare and implement a written hazard communication program. This requirement is to help ensure that compliance with the standard is done in a systematic way and that all elements are coordinated. The written program must indicate how you will address the requirements of paragraphs F, labels and other forms of warning, and G, safety data sheets, and H, employee information and training in your workplace. The written program also requires employers to maintain a list of the hazardous chemicals known to be present in the workplace. Using the product identifier, like the product name, common name, or the chemical name, to prepare this list will make it easier for you to track the status of safety data sheets and labels of a particular hazardous chemical. Now, remember, the product identifier must be the same name that appears on the label and SDS of the hazardous chemical. This gets us to step number 3. Ensure containers are labeled. Keep labels on shipped containers and label workplace containers where required. Chemical manufacturers and importers are required to provide labels on shipped containers with the following information: product identifier, a signal word, pictograms, hazard statements, precautionary statements, and the name, address, and phone number of the responsible party. Therefore, when an employer receives a hazardous chemical from a supplier, all of this information will be located together on the label. There could be additional information, however, but at a minimum, it will contain the information I just covered. So as the employer, you're required to ensure the containers in the workplace are labeled. You may use the same label from the supplier, or you may label workplace containers with alternatives like third-party systems, the NFPA or Hazardous Materials Identification System, or HMIS labels. Those are the most common. The NFPA Diamond or the HMIS label. This is in addition to the other required information. So any container of hazardous chemicals in the workplace must, at a minimum, include the product identifier and general information concerning the hazards of the chemical. So whatever method you choose, your workers need to have access to the complete hazard information. Step number 4, maintain safety data sheets. Maintain SDSs for each hazardous chemical in the workplace. Ensure the safety data sheets are readily accessible to employees. Safety data sheets are the source of detailed information on a particular hazardous chemical. Employers have to maintain copies of SDSs for all hazardous chemicals present in your workplace. If you do not receive an SDS from your supplier automatically, you must request one. You must also ensure that SDSs are readily accessible to workers when they are in their work areas during work shifts. This accessibility can be accomplished in different ways. You must decide what is the most appropriate way for your particular workplace. Some employers keep, the SDSs in a binder in a central location, like outside of the safety office, in the pickup truck, or on a construction site, or in the job trailer. The big yellow HAZCOM binder. Others, particularly in workplaces with large numbers of chemicals, provide access electronically. However, if SDSs are supplied electronically, there must be an adequate backup system in place in the event of a power outage, equipment failure, or other emergency involving the primary electronic system used to present that info. In addition, the employer must ensure that workers are trained on how to use the system to access SDSs and are able to obtain hard copies of the SDSs. In the event of a medical emergency, hard copy SDSs have to be immediately available to medical personnel. Step number 5, inform and train your employees. Train employees on the hazardous chemicals in their work area before initial assignment and when new hazards are introduced. Include the requirements of the standard, hazards of the chemicals, appropriate PPE measures, and where and how to obtain additional information. Paragraph H of the HCS requires that employers train employees on the hazardous chemicals in their work area before their initial assignment, as well as when new hazards are introduced into the work area. As you change chemicals or processes, if it changes anything about the hazards that they're exposed to, you have to retrain them. It has to be conducted in a manner and language that employees can understand, and workers must understand that they are exposed to hazardous chemicals potentially and what to do in the event of an emergency. They have to know labels. Safety data sheets can provide them with information on hazards of a chemical. These items should be consulted when needed. In addition, workers must have a general understanding of what information is provided on that label in SDS and how to access them. They must be aware of the protective measures available in their workplace, how to use or implement these measures, and whom they should contact if an issue arises. You've got to cover all this stuff. And we are at the final step, step number 6. Evaluate and reassess your program. Review your hazard communication program periodically to make sure that it is still working and meeting its objective, and revise your program as appropriate to address changes in conditions in the workplace like new chemicals, new hazards and processes, things like that. Although the HCS does not require you to evaluate and reassess your hazard communication program, it must remain current and relevant for you and your employees. The best way to achieve this is to review your HAZCOM program periodically. It's recommended annually, by the way, to make sure it's still working and meeting its objectives, as I stated before. There is a document, I'll have a link in the show notes. It's called Hazard Communication, Small Entity Compliance Guide for Employers that Use Hazardous Chemicals. Okay, it gives you more detailed information on how to implement an effective hazard communication program. And I'll have that link in there. And that's not the tool I was talking about. But I just ran down essentially how employers can implement an effective hazard communication program by following 6 simple steps. Sounds great. I did not come up with this. I basically read from a free tool available to anybody that wants to grab it and use it. And it's not just for HAZCOM. It's called an OSHA fact sheet. If you go to OSHA.gov, you can go to the A to Z topic, A to Z index, or you can search the menu that has topics is the name of the menu tab across the top. If you click topics, you'll be able to sort through all the various safety and health topics. But this OSHA fact sheet is free. It is available for you. It can help educate you real quickly on what is required for, in this case, hazard communication, like a HAZCOM program. But this is an underutilized tool. A lot of the questions I get about, hey, what do I need to do for this? What do I need to do for that? There's probably an OSHA fact sheet on that topic. And I know it's not cool to go to the OSHA.gov website and hang out, start reading a bunch of this stuff. And yeah, the language they use sometimes, we don't speak that language. We don't talk that way. So it can be hard to interpret some topics, but let's face it. First, if we are responsible for safety and health management at our facility, or we're a small business owner or a supervisor, you got to understand this stuff. So OSHA fact sheets, they're available for many, many topics, and they're free. Grab them and review them, and then compare them to what you're currently doing or not doing, or use them as sort of a starting point, in this case for hazard communication, on how to set up your own hazard communication program. Again, it was broken down into 6 steps. There's going to be a link to a more detailed guide on how you can establish a hazard communication program for your company. I wanted to illustrate how simple and easy some of these fact sheets are. I mean, it sounds like a perfect podcast episode, right? Let me read that again. How an employer can implement an effective hazard communication program by following 6 simple steps. I'm going to totally steal that. But this is public use. It's OSHA.gov. You can take that information and make your own safety talk. You can use it to base your own hazard communication manual, a HAZCOM manual. I encourage you to do that. That's what the OSHA website and the OSHA standards are there for. It's to help educate us so that we become familiar with this stuff. It's actually law. It's the federal law. Employers have to be familiar with the OSHA requirements. So hey, go to OSHA.gov, go to the A to Z index, and start looking at topics from A to Z, or click the topics tab on the menu and go from there. There are additional resources. You can read the reg for particular topics, but they also have, more often than not, have a little box that says additional resources or information. And there's, EPUBs, there's PDF documents, quick takes, there's fact sheets, things like that can help you. Okay, so hey, I'm still on vacation. I wanted to get another episode out while I was away, and I thought this was an appropriate time to talk about some free tools and resources that you should be taking advantage of. Let me know what you think. Send an email to info@thesafetypropodcast.com or go to thesafetypropodcast.com. Look for the podcast page and go to this episode and leave a comment there or shoot me an email. All right, that wraps it up. I hope to be back at it. I'll give you an update on how my vacation went. Hopefully it was fun, but otherwise uneventful as far as safety goes, right? So until the next podcast episode, please be safe.